Welcome to the Backstage Creative, the podcast that focuses on the people who work behind the scenes of theater. My name is Krista Copper, and I am a musician who's been involved in the theater industry for many years now. Over the years, I've built some amazing relationships with people who work behind the scenes, and I have grown so much as an artist and a musician and member of the theater world by hearing about my friends' jobs and by listening to their stories and the things that frustrate them and the things that get them really excited, to go into the shop that day or to go into work. And so about 2 years ago, I decided to start a podcast where I interviewed people who did those jobs. I think it's a field where there's so many people involved, but yet very few people actually get recognition for the work that they do. And in part, for me at least, that's part of the appeal. I like to be in the pit. I like to be kind of anonymous, and no one really knows I'm there unless I make a mistake or make some funny noise, or my my instrument makes a weird noise when it's not supposed to. But I think there's room to recognize more people in the theater industry, right? It doesn't always need to be about the actors and directors. Sometimes the spotlight, I think, should be on the stage manager or the mixer. So that's one of the things that I aim to do with this show. Thank you for listening. Whether this is your first episode or you've listened to them all, I am so appreciative of the fact that you're taking the time to listen to this. There's just so much out there, right? There's so many podcasts and there's so much music and so many shows to consume. And so I'm grateful that you're listening to this, doing whatever it is you're doing. I know I like to listen to podcasts when I run or when I'm cleaning. So whatever you're doing right now, I'm glad that this is the soundtrack to whatever activity you're doing. Today is my conversation with Susan Sampliner. Susan is the company manager for Wicked on Broadway. Susan is the first company manager I've had on the show. Much like Emily Grishman was the first music copyist, Susan has the distinction of being the first company manager. This was a good conversation. You'll hear in the interview, I don't really have much interaction with the company manager. Usually they pick me up from the airport or from the bus station. And then I usually rarely see them again. So it was neat to sit down and hear more about the company manager role and all the things that they do behind the scenes that I didn't realize. So I learned a lot in this episode, and I know that you will as well. Here we go. Here's my conversation with Susan Sampliner. So how have you been keeping yourself busy, during these last 6 months?
I keep thinking things are going to slow down, but they don't.
Oh,
So even though, it took me 3 months to close down the show and to, put everything to bed and stuff, but things still just keep coming up. So, yesterday we released a voting video, and it took a lot of work to get the video done and made and out and deal with the company and all of that. Things just keep coming up. All the planning for how do we reopen. There're just lots of meetings and they don't really stop. So I've been busy with that, busy with doing a lot of social justice reading and webinars and things, and busy with the BGA. So I stay busy.
what do you mean by closing down a show? Like, what does that involve?
Well, I mean, there was paperwork. There were apartments that people were in that had to be, get out of the rent and get people out of there. We had to, return ticket sales. We had a $10 million advance at that point, and then we stopped doing shows. So those all had to be refunded. And I don't have to do that, but I have to work with the box office of how does that happen. There was just a lot of stuff, just figuring out what money did we need to, what bills hadn't come in yet but need to be paid and for how long. Just making all the plans for running the business of the show when you've never just stopped a show from running for, maybe for a day or two, but not for a year. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of work.
How have the talks about reopening been going? As much as you feel comfortable sharing.
Well, there's going to be an announcement on Friday of the next time, and so it's going to be later than what they've said. It's not January, but it's going to be a few months later than that. But it'll
Mm-hmm.
mean we'll be closed for more than a year, and that's a very long time.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of hard to wrap my mind around sometimes. Like everything is stopped, and it's hard to. I don't know. For me, it's hard to kind of grapple with.
For me too, and also for my company, to kind of keep everybody's spirits up, and you do a little bit of cheerleading and coaching and mom and dadding, and there's a lot of people with livelihoods on the line, with families, with homes. It's a big deal. So
Hmm. Yeah. So you're the company manager for Wicked, which I think is such a cool job. I think. And it's not one that I think about often, like company managers. So I'm a musician, and so I deal with the company manager a little bit, but most of my dealings are with other people. How did you take us through your background? How does one get into company management?
my route was a little bit non-traditional, because I never meant to go into this field. I really was going to do something else. I was going to be an archaeologist. I got to through school and realized I wasn't going to do that, and I was always interested in theater. I used to go to the theater a lot, but I knew I didn't want to be an actor, and I went looking for what could I do, and nobody could really guide me. So I started as a stage manager, and I did that for 3 years. I did a lot of backstage work, mostly for free, while I was working as a secretary during the day, and I was stage managing or doing props or electrics or costumes at night, just to learn all of it. And I did that for about 3 years, never got my equity card. But I realized that I really didn't like stage management, and I really wanted to find out. I didn't like tech, I didn't really like rehearsal, and I really didn't like to be at everybody's beck and call and not know how the decisions got made. And so I found a job in a general manager's office. And as soon as I got there, I knew that's what I wanted to do, because in that office, we really got to see where everything happened. I saw all the budgets, I saw all the contracts, I saw all the how every decision was being made. And I was never bored. I was never sitting around waiting for things to happen. Everything was happening all the time and quickly. So it was a much better fit for me. So I didn't really have any training. I didn't have, except that once I got to that office, I went back to SUNY Purchase and got a certificate in arts management. At the time I was coming in the business, there were no courses in theater administration or theater management. That just didn't exist. But by the time I was actually working, that was starting to exist. So I did that. And mostly I learned it by doing it. So I just worked my way up by assisting other company managers and joining a union and going through an apprenticeship program, and then hanging out my shingle that I was now a company manager.
So is that a thing that you can get a major, like a degree in, is theater management?
You can now. That's usually called arts administration. But there used to, for a while, there were just graduate schools in it, and then now there are undergraduate courses in it, in arts administration. And you can study all kinds of things. You can study marketing, you can study general management, you can study not for profit theater or commercial theater. So there are a lot of choices of what you can study, and different schools have different programs. In the beginning, it was kind of a small program of some of the bigger drama schools. So, like Yale had a program, and Columbia had a program. But now a lot of schools have programs in arts administration. But that just wasn't true when I came into the field.
Nice. A company manager is that someone like the production hires, or is that something like the theater hires?
No, the production. So
Okay.
basically, when a producer decides to produce a show, the first person they hire is a lawyer, and the next person they hire is a general manager. And the general manager is going to be the person who's going to help them hire the people they need, do all the budgets, do the contracts, get this all going. And they will do all of the developmental production, so workshops or labs or readings, all of that by the general manager. But when the show's ready to either go on the road or come to Broadway, that's when a company manager gets added. So the general manager is looking at all the big picture, and the company manager is added right before rehearsals start, to start being the point person and looking at the day-to-day operations of the show. And in the beginning, we'll do a lot of catch up. We have to read everything else that's been put in place and get up to speed with all the decisions that have been made. But in time, we will become the person who knows the most about the running of the show as anybody, because the general managers will start working on other productions or other companies of this production, but each company manager just focuses on our particular company of that particular show. So if you used Wicked as an example, there were readings and workshops and things before I got onto it, but I joined Wicked in March of 2003, right before the show went to San Francisco for an out-of-town tryout. So we rehearsed in New York, we went to San Francisco, we tried it out, we came back, they took the summer to rewrite. We went into rehearsals for New York. We opened in New York, and I've been there ever since. So that's 17 years ago. So it's been a long gig, but most shows don't go like that. Most shows, a company manager works from when the show starts until it ends. And most shows don't run this many years, so you could be with a show for 2 or 3 months if it is a flop. You could be with it for a year or two if it's a hit, or you could be with it for a very long time if it's a super hit, like Wicked is.
Nothing in theater is stable, right? No job has like absolute stability, but is it pretty easy to go, say a show closes, is it pretty easy to jump on another show right away? Is there usually quite a bit of downtime between shows?
It kind of depends on, first of all, how good you are. I mean, I will say I have never been without work, so I take that as a compliment. But, there are only 40 Broadway theaters, and there are probably maybe another 20 or 30 tours out. And I belong to a union, which is ATPAM, which has 600 members. So not everybody can be working all the time. What I've found over the years is the good people do work. Depending on what offices you've worked for, you might go from one production right to another, or you might be unemployed for a little while waiting for your next job. When I came into the business, their offices did several shows at the same time. And then, and producers would produce one show after another. They might produce 4 or 5 shows in a year, but that's because shows at that point didn't cost even $1 million. When you're now doing shows that cost 20 to 30 to $50 million, people can't produce them as often, so you might have to wait a little bit until the next gig, or you might have to switch offices to another office that's ready for a manager. So it kind of depends how many people you know, how many shows you've worked on, that sort of thing.
Sure. Besides Wicked, what other shows have you worked on?
When I started, did a couple of Broadway. So I came in company management in 1980. So when I started, I was on Sugar Babies and Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, and Ma Rainey, that's just about to come out as a film, which is kind of cool. You Can't Take It With You. Then I did some off Broadway, Greater Tuna, Marvin's Room, and Jeffrey. I went down to the Public Theater and I did Edwin Drood. I was on the last 4 years of the original company of A Chorus Line. While I was in the Public, I kind of graduated to be a general manager. We were doing 16 shows a year, so that's a lot of shows. And then I went to Lincoln Center and I worked on Contact and Marie Christine. Came back to Broadway, did Chicago and Grease and Jesus Christ Superstar. And then with the office I'm with now, starting in 2000, I did Search for Signs, which is Lily Tomlin's solo show, and then The Graduate, and that led to Wicked. So there have been a lot in between, but those are the highlights.
Uh-huh. Is there a big difference between working on off Broadway versus something like Lincoln Center?
Yes. First, let's do like commercial versus not for profit. In not for profit theater, like Lincoln Center or the Public, they have departments that do a lot of the jobs of a company manager. So there is a marketing department, there is a finance department who actually runs the payroll and pays the bills. There is a tech department that does some of the things that we as commercial company managers actually get involved with. The difference between Broadway and off Broadway is that on off Broadway, you won't have an assistant. You are doing all the jobs of the company manager, but it's probably a much smaller company. It might be a company of 4 to 10 to 12 actors, not a company of 38 actors. I have on my payroll 125 people. That wouldn't happen off Broadway. Um, on Broadway, you'll probably, especially if it's a big musical, you'll have an assistant. So they're there to help you manage the amount of paperwork and cover the shows that it needs, because it's a big show with a lot of people and a lot of moving parts. And so that's different between Broadway and off Broadway. And the other big difference is also between Broadway and touring, because on touring, not only you're doing all the tasks of a company manager, you're also dealing with moving the company from city to city. So you're dealing with travel and housing, and presenters who are different in every city and different contracts that are different in every city with the local crew. So that's different. Whereas in New York, we have much more to do with the marketing. The tour managers have much less to do with the marketing. They're dealing with moving the company from place to place and getting them in and out safely. Where my company stays in one place and they go home at night. I don't have to worry about, do they have their spouse with them and do they need medical care? They have families, they have lives, they have stability. On the road, you have to provide that for them, and you are the face of management. It's just you with the company. So that's a big difference from company managing in New York.
Do you have I don't know, do you prefer one or the other?
I love Broadway. I mean, I liked not for profit. Here's the thing, not for profit, you work for a theater with an artistic director with a vision. And if you like the artistic director and what his vision is for theater, there's nothing more satisfying than supporting that vision and making that work happen. So that happened for me at the Public Theater. I was there when Joe Papp was still alive, and he was doing exciting, wonderful things, and I really believed in what he was trying to do. But the difference there is it doesn't really matter. You do lots of shows in a year, and it really doesn't matter if they're successful or not. They're all being done to support the mission, and some are good and some are not good, and they run as long as the subscription runs, and then you move on to the next one. So there's a lot of stability. You go from show to show without any gap, which is great. You're never out of work as long as you stay with that theater. But it doesn't really matter if the show's that great, So some of them might have a great vision, but they're not really successful. And that's part of the mission of the theater, is to allow some new artists to fail. That's great. But it doesn't really have the excitement of a Broadway show where, you can live and die by the reviews and by the audience response. And it's a
Mhm.
roller coaster. And that to me is very exciting. And it also has the reach of such a bigger world and bigger audience. So, I've really enjoyed my time on Wicked because I was there from the beginning to help build the brand and to watch it go from this show that didn't even really get great reviews, but was an audience favorite right from the start, and grew until the point we had 9 different companies around the world. And it became this huge fan favorite and a very successful brand and show. And that's thrilling to be part of that ride. So I would say that would be my preference. And I haven't actually really done the road. I've done pre-Broadway tours when we kind of tried out The Graduate and tried out Wicked out of town before we came in, but I haven't done the time when you're on the road with a show for a couple of years. One of our company managers has been on the road with Wicked for 15 years. That's a long time. I have not done that.
Yeah, yeah, being involved with something like Wicked, and being able to say like I helped create that, like I can't even imagine. Yeah, the pride that you and everyone else involved with that must feel, because yeah, that's quite a it's rare and it's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, thank you.
What other skills? I mean, you've kind of touched on some of them. Are there any other tasks that you do day to day in your job?
Yeah, I think, one of the things is nobody really knows what a company manager does, which is why when you said, I don't deal with the company manager very often, my actors know that I pay them. That's what they know. And they know that if they need something, if they need their W-2 at the end of the year, their tax documents, or if they have an insurance problem, or if they need tickets, they need something to do their job, they know to come to the company manager, but they really have no idea what I do all day long. They see me at the theater. They think I'm there until intermission, and so they think I have a really short day without realizing I put in a full day of work in an office before I go to the theater. So no 2 days are alike, and I kind of like it that way. But basically, my job is responding to what comes up during the day by phone, by email, by circumstance, and responding to it. So you need to be very good with details. You have to be good at juggling because there are lots of things coming at you from lots of different angles. You have to be good with people because you're doing a lot of problem solving and taking care of people. But in terms of tasks, I'm doing payroll, I'm paying royalties, I'm paying bills, I'm going to marketing and advertising meetings and dealing with ticket sales and working with the box office on what we're selling and how. I'm dealing with insurance when people get hurt. I'm dealing with audience problems with refunds or people have complaints. And it's taking care of the cast and crew. The people have lives, and sometimes their lives conflict with their jobs, and it's part of my job to take care of them and make it possible for them to do both.
Do you have a favorite aspect of your job?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I love going to the show. It's one of the reasons I left general management was I felt that general managers spend most of their time in an office and not at the theater. And if I was going to be working in theater, I want to be at the theater. I don't want to just be in an office. So I actually like my time going to the show. Just so you understand, I'm in an office from pretty much, let's say, 11 to 6, and then I'm at the theater from 7 to 9:30 or so. And so I love that part of the day. I love taking care of the cast and crew. I take great pleasure out of knowing that they couldn't do their job if I don't do my job well. We don't get a lot of thanks, we don't get a lot of applause, but there's some self satisfaction with that. And I like playing with the numbers. I love playing with, how are we doing and what can we do to make ticket sales go up and how do we afford what we want to do and playing with all those numbers. So I enjoy that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never thought of the company manager being involved with like the marketing and the sales. I thought they were just more of like, oh no, I need to go to the hospital.
Right. And from an actor's point of view or a musician, that's what they know we do. So when I've had people get ill, that's exactly what happens, especially on the road when there is no one else to go with them. But even in New York, I have spent many times in the hospital with people. But there is all the business side. If you think of kind of three kinds of managers that run a show. There's a stage manager who takes care of everything from the curtain back, so the cast and crew and everything's happening with the running of the show itself. And you've got a house manager who's dealing with the curtain forward, so they're dealing with all the front of house and the box office and the patrons and keeping the physical building venue running. And then the company manager kind of is part of a triumvirate with the two of them to make sure that everybody's playing well together and that everything that's needed from both sides of the curtain is happening, and coordinating that and reporting back to the producer and general manager how those things are going so that they know how their show is doing.
Mm-hmm. That's a great visual. I like that. Let's talk about the people side of things, because people are messy,
Hmm.
and with people, it's rarely black and white. So how do you? This is such a broad question, but take it however way you want. How do you deal with just difficult situations? Either actors are being like crazily picky, or people are struggling to get along. How do you deal with people all the time?
It's hard, especially in the theater, because they're not just people. They're artistic people. They're people with big personalities, and those personalities don't always blend so well. And it's a hierarchy, so you have to kind of keep that in mind while you're dealing with it. I have the advantage of being middle management. So the buck doesn't stop with me. I am the person who the problems come to and I solve as best as I can. But sometimes I take that decision back to my producer or general manager. So I don't have to be the one making the final decision, especially when it gets really sticky. But when I'm dealing with it, it's about listening and compassion and understanding that, for them to give 100% every single day, 8 times a week, of what that takes. So I try to advocate for them. I try to listen to them. I try to diffuse any of the hot temper things that happen. And then the biggest thing that I do is I buy time and I basically say, I will get back to you. I hear what you're saying. I hear what the problem is. But if I can solve it, I will solve it. If I can't solve it, give me till tomorrow to work on this and then I'll get back to you. And the key is to then get back to them. But what you can't do is buy yourself that time and then not get back to them. It's got to get resolved. But you don't have to resolve it as a company manager in the moment necessarily. So if you
Mm.
can buy yourself the time, because sometimes it's just giving people the time to cool off. They'll also, in those 24 hours, they'll cool down some and they'll figure out some of how to solve what their issue is. I make sure that they feel heard and I'm really listening. And I try to go back and advocate for them because I think I understand the stresses they're under. And then I try to come back to them and see if we can resolve it. So that's generally what I do.
Do you ever get tired, just kind of worn out of always serving other people, and being there for other people?
It's a good question. I think company managers do burn out for a couple of reasons. One is because you're always taking care of people, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's because we work really long hours. You work the same number of days as everybody else in the show, but you're working full time. It's not working just the shows. You're working from morning till night, 6 days a week. I'm able to get a little time off because on a big musical, I have an assistant. So I only go to the theater 4 times a week, not 8 times a week. So that helps a little bit. But you're kind of on call all the time. So, even on my days off, even on the nights that I'm not at the theater, I'm on a cell phone and available and have to be willing to do that. So you can burn out. And there are very many people who don't last long doing this because it can burn you out and it can get you tired. I try to make sure that I take real time off. It's easier to do when you're on a long running show because you really can plan for specific longer breaks and you can hire somebody to replace you so that you could take a month away. And so that's when I recharge and come back, and I'm always come back way better. And if you can build that in, it's easier. What's harder for people is if they go from show to show to show and they never have the time to decompress between shows, or if they're constantly in production, that's much harder. But on a long running show, you can tire out because it is tiring, but you can put in breaks to give yourself some time off.
Besides, taking breaks, is there anything else that you do to help, like stress management or self care?
Yeah, meditation comes in really handy because you really do have to try to keep calm, and it's not always easy, but I find that that helps me. And I go for pretty regular massage and chiropractor care just to make sure my body feels, in line and so that I'm not in any kind of pain. I mean, we spend a lot of time sitting at a desk. Your body can get really screwed up by that. You can't always get as much physical exercise as you'd like, although I do a lot of walking because even walking from the office to the theater and around the theater, you do quite a bit of walking to get around, especially a big theater like Wicked. So I try to do that, is get as much walking in. But I also try to just take care of my body so that I'm not in physical pain. And I try to get a lot of sleep. That's not an easy thing to do, but I always feel better, and I know I'm a better manager when I've had enough sleep.
Yeah, it's amazing to me, like how much just having like a tiny headache can just kind of blossom into causing all sorts of problems,
Absolutely.
affect your attitude. And if you don't kind of keep on top of those things, those little things can really become big things.
Yep, absolutely.
I love a good story. Do you have any good, I don't like any funny stories, either working on Wicked or any of the other shows you've worked on?
I was trying to think. I really, they all kind of happen in the moment. I think one of my favorite was when I was working on The Graduate, and I had Alicia Silverstone in the cast. First of all, that was a great show to work on because it had Kathleen Turner as the lead actress, and she had done so many shows and she was so experienced. But then we had Jason Biggs and Alicia Silverstone, who were brand new in the business, and neither of them had ever done a show on stage. So watching Kathleen kind of be in charge and teach these two young people how to be theater stars was kind of great. But my favorite thing was that Alicia was a vegan and a huge animal rights person. And I had never had somebody like that on a show of mine. And it changed. She had such strong moral principles that she felt strongly about. She made us change the set for her, that we had to have sheep friendly wool carpeting, and we had to have, like her costumes had to be made out of natural fibers, and she had all kinds of demands. And when it came time for our first opening night, which was in Baltimore, I went to the presenter and said, okay, where are we having the opening night? And they had rented a steakhouse. Now, They hadn't thought about, they didn't know that Alicia was a vegan. And I thought, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to get her to go into a steakhouse? She's going to hate it. Um, but we made it happen, and there was a lot of negotiation. And I just remember at one point in the party looking up, and I was chomping on a bone of a steak. And I look up, and Alicia is just glaring at me, and I thought, oh God. So that's always been one of my fun memories. But what goes with that is she actually, she and Kathleen, they were asked to wear certain clothes for the opening, and they said that they didn't want to wear anything with animal products, and they got the catalog of what to wear, and it was from Anne Klein. Kathleen said to them, "Don't put anything animal in this brochure because she won't wear it." And the first thing they opened up to was like a lambskin coat or
Oh
something like
no.
that. So Kathleen was like, forget that. And Alicia called me the next day, or her manager called me and said, who can I talk to at Anne Klein? We have to make them understand why she won't wear anything from this. And so she got on the phone with the head of the company. And don't you know, they changed their product line because Alicia had taken a stand. And I
Hmm.
thought, it was a big lesson for me of the power of what an actor can do if they feel strongly about something. They have a platform, and they have a celebrity brings a certain profile that they can play if they feel strongly about things. So watching her do that was really pretty thrilling.
Yeah, speaking of that makes a good segue. Speaking of like a platform, you are also the founder, correct, of the Broadway Green Alliance,
Co-founder, yes.
co-founder. So take what is that? What is the purpose of that?
Okay, it's a group that was started in 2008. What happened was that in 2006, our producer David Stone saw An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore's film, and realized that all this was happening in the world and that we needed to do something. And he realized he had a big show with a green main character, and that maybe there was a way for Wicked to get involved with saving the planet. So he asked the four companies of Wicked to try to brainstorm and think of what could we do better that was more sustainable. And we did that for 18 months. And after 18 months, we had a town hall at the Gershwin where we invited the entire industry to come and share what we were doing and what they were doing and see if there was a way to bring sustainability into the Broadway industry. And from that was in June of 2008. From that, the BGA was born, Broadway Green Alliance. And we now have two staff members. We are a full time organization with representatives on every Broadway show. We call them Green Captains, and they are our liaisons back to the BGA. And we've helped do things both backstage and front of house to make things more sustainable and less wasteful. So, just the best example I can give is on Wicked, we were using a new battery for every microphone every day, every body mic that an actor wore. We were putting in a new battery every day and throwing them out. We were going through 15,000 AA batteries a year.
Whoa.
And we realized there was a way that we could switch that by just switching to rechargeable batteries. And we figured out how. And our sound designer was saying, you'll never do it. Those batteries die. You'll never make it work. And we figured out a way to do it. And we went from doing 15,000 batteries a year to 96. So that's kind of the stuff we try to do. We show, and Wicked does the experimenting, and then we share it with the rest of the industry. And we've managed to make a huge difference on how shows do production more sustainably.
Yeah, that's incredible. Are there any other like what are some other issues with sustainability in the theater world?
Well, think about even things like stuffers in programs. The way we used to do stuffers was we used to pre-print enough stuffers for a week's full of performances for each understudy. And then when that actor left the show, we'd have to throw out thousands of sheets of paper. Now we figured out a way that we can make them on the day of when we know what we need, and we don't throw out anything because we make what we need, and then we don't have to throw anything out at the end. So we're saving a huge amount of paper on that. So we're working on lots of other things like that in lighting, on scripts. How do we do it using iPads instead of printing out scripts and page changes all the time? So we're always looking for ways to make better use of less waste, fewer resources, and to kind of encourage people to recycle and reuse rather than just buying duplicates or buying more than they need, and certainly not throwing stuff out. When we first started, we would see a show at the end, and everybody would just dump everything into a dumpster and put it into landfill. And we don't do that anymore. There's still some stuff that goes to dumpsters, but we work really hard to try. And right now, we're keeping somewhere between 85 and 90% of shows out of dumpsters, out of landfill. So it's been extremely effective, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. Has there been any like bleed over into other like off Broadway or regional theaters?
Everywhere, yeah. We have so we had the green captains on all the Broadway shows, all the off-Broadway shows. There are 45 off-Broadway green captains. We have chapters now in Chicago and Atlanta. There are other all of the touring markets, a lot of them have green captains. We've now gone into colleges and universities because we're realizing we want kids to come into the business already thinking green. We want them to learn that in college, so by the time they get there, it's part of how they think about doing theater. So that's now we're in lots of colleges around the country, and it's becoming part of curriculum. And one of my great favorite things is that when we started, we couldn't find interns that knew anything about both theater and green things. And now we're getting kids who are majoring in both. We're doing double majors in theater and sustainability. And that's really rewarding because that's changing lives. That's really different.
I love that. That's exciting. I mean, yeah, I'm excited to see how that keeps progressing over the years.
Follow us on it's broadwaygreen.com, and we've got a lot of resources and a lot of ways so that people don't have to figure it out again. You can just go to the website and find out how other shows are doing what you want to do, and you can just copy what we're doing. There are lots of resources there. You can do this in your school, you can do this at home, there in your office. There are lots of things that we've brought up that apply to other places.
That's great. You've mentioned you've been in this industry for a while. How have you seen the industry change over the years that you've been active?
Well, the industry, it's bigger. It felt much more like a family when I came in, and now the productions are bigger and the producers are bigger. Like I was used to working for one producer at a time. Now you have every show could have anything from 5 to 40 producers, so that's very different. The costs have changed tremendously. So, a chorus line when it moved to Broadway cost $1 million. Wicked, when it came to Broadway, cost $14 million.
Oh.
Spider-Man, when it opened, cost $75 million. Those are different. And ticket prices have changed a lot. So how we sell tickets has changed tremendously. Originally, you only could buy, if you think about it, when you went to a theater, it used to have a sign in front of the box office and said, these are the prices for orchestra, mezzanine, and balcony seats. And it might change for certain days of the week, but there only was one price per section. Now you see TV screens where we change the prices every single day, and we can change the price of a ticket every single day. So that's called supply and demand. And it took the theater a long time to do it, but we now do that so that we can actually, help control the market and get more value from our seats when there's more demand for our seats. So when Christmas comes, we charge more because there's more demand for that week. When the summer comes and there's less demand, we can lower them. So that's a big change in the industry.
hmm I like to ask advice questions. I like to do that kind of at the end as like my closing question. But did we? Is there anything else that we didn't get to? Anything more about Broadway Green Alliance or anything about what you do that we didn't get to that you'd like to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered. I guess actually the last thing I would like to talk about is kind of what does it take to be a good company manager? Because I think, or what people need to know if they want to even consider doing this,
hmm
which is that it's not a glamorous job, but it's very rewarding. It can be thankless, but not if you're good. It can be very tedious. There's a tremendous amount of paperwork and time on the phone dealing with details. It's a tough schedule, as I talked about. It's 6 days a week and 8 shows a week, so it's hard to have a personal life. And during production, it's almost impossible. A long running show can get boring, but people ask me that all the time. Aren't you bored being on the same show for this many years? And not at all. Like things change every day. We talked about the skills required. It's important to be able to keep calm and keep your head when other people are losing theirs. Big one is you don't need to know everything, but you need to know where to find everything. So a lot of it is about networking and paying attention and trying to figure out, if I had to deal with this, where would I go? Who would I ask? And the other part that I want people to know is that you're both a union member and a part of management, and that's a little bit tricky. That sometimes you're labor and sometimes you're representing management, but in truth, we are part of labor like any musician or any actor or any stagehand. We're an employee of the producer. It's great experience if you want to be a general manager or producer someday, because you'll learn everything about how a show is run. And many company managers have gone on to become either general managers or producers. So if that's something you want to do, it's a great place to start.
Mm-hmm. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who's young, in college, majoring in arts management, what one piece of advice would you give young people who are interested in company management?
I'm going to give one piece of advice in general, and then company manager. In general, I'd say don't be afraid to choose again. Make a choice, try this, and if it doesn't fit for you, don't be afraid to give it up and try something different and pivot. Because I think that we don't always know as we come into a business what's going to be a good fit for us. And I think there's a lot of pressure these days to get out of school and think I've got to know what I'm going to do. But there are so many careers in the theater where you could do something slightly different that might be a better fit for you. So that would be my advice with that. For advice for company management is I would try to get an internship, because as much as you study in school arts management, or if you didn't study it, you're going to learn it by doing it. So I highly advise getting an internship. Most of the general management offices have them, and try to do a semester in an office and see if this feels like fun to you, or see if it feels like it's just too dry and I just can't. It's too much detail, and I want to, or maybe you want to spend more time in the theater than we spend in the theater. Then find something else where you can do that. I think an internship's a good way to know, does that fit for you?
Yeah, there are so many options of things that you can do in the theater world and the arts world. I mean, it's a hard life. It's not easy, but there are a lot of things that you can do with the skills that you acquire working in this field.
Absolutely. And I always tell people to look at the back of a playbill, look at the staff page, and you will realize how many different careers there are in the theater, and all of them are good paying jobs. So just look at them all, find out more about them, and see if something feels like a better fit for you, and try that. And then there is that opportunity here. People are looking for people to work and are willing to give people a break. It's that kind of industry where we kind of help people on the way up, and people helped us on the way up, and then we pay it back and help them. So, don't be afraid to try something else, or have an informational interview with somebody and say, tell me what you do, or do some reading and find out what that is and see if it feels fun, see if it feels good. It's a hard field, so you don't want to spend your time doing this. You might not make money for a little while, so you make sure you love it, and don't just agree to it and then burn out on it because it really isn't what you wanted to do. Try something else.
The music for the Backstage Creative was improvised and performed by Ian Leroy, and the logo was designed by Zach Rimbold.